talking now about legislative priorities, what's going on at the federal level. We're joined by Justin Strekal. He is the policy director for NORML, and he actually started of 2016. I've had the opportunity to work with him over several lobby days and coordinating visits with legislators. And I know that he's working really hard up in DC to be an upstanding lobbyist for us. So Justin, I'm going to go ahead and showcase your video now and turn it over to you and your federal update. Thank you.
Jax, well, thank you so very much for all that you do running Texas NORML and the truly inspirational work of yourself and activists and advocates all around the Lone Star State, you know, the largest prohibition state remaining in the union. So I know with the biannual legislature, things are a bit crazy as far as starting and stopping. And just thank you. And to all those watching, truly, if you're not supporting Texas NORML, you know, make sure you like their Facebook, follow them on Twitter, make a contribution. You know, the work of this advocacy is not free, so please financially support Texas NORML if you're in a position to do so. And thanks again for the opportunity. Again, my name is Justin Strekal, and I am the National Political Director and Federal Lobbyist for NORML. So I often joke that I am NORML's scumbag federal lobbyist. And I make that joke not because the work that we're doing is unimportant, but the structures of Capitol Hill and our federal government are not designed to accommodate the voices of everyday Americans being heard. And for better or for worse, I'm the guy you got up in Washington, D.C., talking about federal policy when it comes to cannabis and the Controlled Substances Act and what reforms need to be enacted so that we see a legal and free future. So today, I want to walk through with all of you on the live stream a couple updates that we've seen so far in the 116th Congress, as well as talk about where we are in the current coronavirus global pandemic and how that impacts our work. So I will share my screen. If everything is working out right, you will be seeing the 116th Congress Cannabis Report. Jax is giving me the thumbs up, it worked. So over 60 bills have been introduced so far this legislative session, which is a 2-year session, it's a biannual session. So don't forget, vote in November. The whole federal congressional delegation is up, as well as your senator. And, you know, over 60 bills have been introduced so far, either to address the core foundational pillar of marijuana Schedule I status, or nitpicking around the edges of prohibition, trying to mitigate some of their deleterious effects. So the first bill that I want to talk about is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, better known as the MORE Act. This bill was the first time this bill has ever been introduced in the Congress. It was introduced on July 23rd by Congressman Jerry Nadler, who is the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. His introduction of this legislation marks the first time in history that the Judiciary Committee chairman has introduced or been on a bill to end prohibition. There's a lot of firsts, so bear with me. So given that position, he chairs, including Chairwoman Nadia Velasquez of New York, who's the chair of the Small Business Committee, create a funding structure and a pathway so that way we can promote local ownership of the emerging legal marijuana economy. You know, one thing that is a concern both from, you know, the prohibitionists who fight the work that we're doing as we're trying to end marijuana-related arrests and create a consumer marketplace, to, you know, a concern that's held by many advocates is this idea of big pot or big marijuana. And if we're going to truly ensure that we have economic opportunity and pathways to prosperity and ownership, we need to make sure that we're prioritizing local ownership as much as possible. So what the MORE Act would do is it would create funding streams administered through the Small Business Administration to allow grants, capital loans, waiving of licensing fees for locals who meet definitions of an impacted community. And that can mean a number of different things. There's no single component on how that definition is structured, but it's primarily targeted to make sure that those in the middle class, working class, entrepreneurial class are going to have a pathway into this emerging legal economy. And with the introduction of this bill, there was a hearing in last July on this. It was the first ever hearing in the House Judiciary Committee on expanding marijuana legalization around the country. And then last November, on November 20th, we had the first ever markup of a bill to end federal prohibition. And the bill passed on a bipartisan vote of 24-10. So we were very proud of that. Again, a bipartisan moment. It was the first time we've ever had a bipartisan moment to end prohibition actually move through the congressional committee process. Since then, since its passage last November in the committee, it's been reportedly waived, which is one of the jargons that we have by the Small Business Committee, saying that they don't need to look at it. But the bill was assigned to an additional 6 committees, because it's important to remember marijuana prohibition is very intersectional with multiple aspects of public policy. And given the makeup and structure of Congress, it has to go through multiple committees. So small business said, no, it's good, we'll go on. Following that, just a week and a half later, we had a committee hearing in the Energy and Commerce Committee. And it was a very positive hearing. There was only one prohibitionist member of Congress who made his views known during that hearing. And his name was Representative Buddy Carter. He's a Republican out of Georgia. And then the next day, after saying he doesn't like the idea of legalization, he co-sponsored a bill to expand marijuana research. So even those who are most staunchly against us are willing to acknowledge that we can do better than the status quo. But unfortunately, the last action I have to report on that bill is from January. Since then, as a result of the coronavirus and the shutting down of our systems, we are not able to continue to shepherd that bill through the congressional committee process. It's our sincere hope that when we get back, we'll be able to continue to advance the legislation. The second bill that I want to give you an update on is the Safe Banking Act, or the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. This is something that in Texas, with your extremely nascent CBD-focused program, the limited number of companies engaged in that, and then around the country in the 33 medical states and 11 adult use states, these emerging companies are not able to get basic access to banking services, forcing consumers to have to use cash, forcing them to have to deal with their contractors in cash, et cetera, et cetera. This last year became the first bill ever that was a cannabis-related bill to pass a chamber of Congress. It passed last September on the 25th, overwhelming bipartisan majority, 321 to 103. Only one Democrat voted against it, and 91 Republicans, representing 45% of the Republican caucus, voted in favor of that bill. And thanks to a group of unlikely allies, with on one side you had NORML, and on the other side you had the American Banking Association, working together to whip this bill to make sure that we can get it passed. Unfortunately, since then, we've gotten held up in the Senate as a result of Senate Banking Committee Chairman Mike Crapo, who is a senator from Idaho, one of the 4 remaining states that completely is in compliance with the Controlled Substances Act, has since decided that he is no longer in favor of this public policy. So friends who are watching, if you have relatives, family, friends in the state of Idaho, please, please, please encourage them to contact Senator Crapo's office and say that for the good of policy reform around the country and for a number of public safety related matters, we need to make sure that these emerging businesses get that basic access. One aspect of this that's really come into focus during the COVID-19 outbreak as a result of having all these cash transactions is that medical patients are at much higher likelihood of having autoimmune issues or otherwise being at risk for transmission of COVID. And now they're continuing to be forced to use cash and transactions, thus increasing person-to-person interactions and increasing the likelihood for transmission of corona. So, it's another way that marijuana policy can intersect with what's happening and we're experiencing today during the pandemic and broad and writ large. If I can get this to come down, there we go. The last thing that I wanted to take, and Jax, I don't know, are we gonna do any Q&A or is this just me talking? I can't.
Let me unmute myself. Sorry about that. I do have a few follow-up things that I would like to chat about. We are running just like a few minutes behind, so we can just address them real quickly after you do this last point.
Perfect. So one of the things that a lot of lawmakers are at the federal level are really antsy about is the term descheduling. So I just want to take a few moments with your wonderful audience and talk about it, so that way we make sure that we're getting this right, because a lot of lawmakers are looking for ways to evolve their positions on marijuana policy. We're reaching that tipping point, and yet one of our greatest concerns is that policymakers will believe that we should reschedule, not deschedule, marijuana and from the Controlled Substances Act, because they view, just verbally, it sounds about right that it seems like a middle ground. And one of the reasons why we need to push back against this fiercely and immediately is that no state has constructed their legal marijuana programs to be in compliance under the event of a rescheduling. So as of right now, we refer to the existing tension between federal prohibition and state level legal programs as an uneasy detente. But should we have a rescheduling passed by Congress, then that would be fresh congressional intent with enforcement actions that every single state program, business, patient, and consumer would be in violation of this new federal rescheduled law. So just wanted to just do a couple seconds to riff on the CSA, because it's important to remember where we are. The definition of Schedule 1 in the CSA is the drug has a high potential for abuse, no currently accepted medical use, and there's a lack of acceptable safety for the use of the drug or substance, even under medical supervision. Now, clearly, many of you sitting at home know this to be patently false, right? So, clearly we need to remove it from Schedule 1. But it's important to keep in mind, so I'm going a little ahead of myself, that in order for marijuana to be properly regulated, alcohol is not within the Controlled Substances Act, tobacco is not within the Controlled Substances Act, all these, natural not natural pharmaceuticals, like vitamins and other things are not controlled by those criminal provisions under the CSA. So in order for us to be able to enact sensible pro-consumer safety regulation, we need to take marijuana completely out of the CSA. So this is one of the handouts that I give in Congress. I'm not showing it, this is our super secret document. And I'm trying to get to this place. Okay, here we go. So this is what we use when I'm walking the halls of Congress, when I'm talking with state lawmakers, with policymakers and their staffs and other interested parties, to really try to give them the 30,000 foot and at the same time the nitty gritty on making sure that we get federal reform right and that we remove marijuana completely from the CSA. So yeah, that's my shtick, Jax. I'm ready to answer questions.
So you actually, let me make sure I'm unmuted. I am unmuted. Fabulous. You actually covered a couple of the questions that people had. So they were wondering, what was kind of the focused federal action.
Mhm.
And so I dropped the more action link in the comments for them. And then I also went ahead and just connected to your action page, because I know that you do have actually several federal actions, including a Texas-centric one, right? Which we talked about. So I'll share that. And then the other questions were kind of talking about, how can conservatives help at the federal level?
Mhm.
And I think that you actually touched on it, because you're talking about rescheduling versus descheduling. And, the Texas GOP platform has a plank that supports the rescheduling. So it sounds like something that our conservative advocates could really focus on would be maybe just tweaking literally one letter in that plank could make a significant difference.
And it's important to stress, particularly with our conservative and Republican friends, that descheduling cannabis at the federal level is not going to change a single law across this country. It is just going to merely mean that the state legal programs are no longer in violation of federal law. Descheduling cannabis is not going to force legalization into a single community in Texas. But should Texas lawmakers in the future choose to implement a robust medical program, or eventually an adult use program, then they wouldn't have to be suffering the collateral consequences of federal prohibition, like I mentioned with the banking situation for the legal industry, as well as jeopardizing possible federal dollars. There's all kinds of tax liabilities, and all kinds of other problems that stem from this federal state tension.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. I
got
will.
my Texas NORML button on.
Oh, yes.
Thank you
You've
for
been
all
here.
you do down there in Texas.
And thank you for everything you do up at the Capitol. I really appreciate it. Justin, I look forward to seeing, how we can continue to push this forward together. So thank you for participating.